Do you hear hair professionals talk about the importance of healthy hair and scalp practices while they spew supposed knowledge about science or research? Or maybe you are a professional who wants to learn more about what it takes to properly do scientific studies. Well, today we are going to discuss what really goes into researching solutions for optimal hair and scalp care. Welcome to the Our Black Hair Matters Lunchtime Chat. My name is Dr. Crystal Porter, and I'm a hair scientist and owner of Main Insights, which is a company that conducts research and focuses on the hair needs of people of African descent. This platform is designed to elevate the Black hair care industry and empower consumers and hair practitioners with education and research that is driven by science. And I thank you for joining me today on the chat. Now, I usually talk a lot about the need for scientific research, but I haven't had a focused discussion about what researchers consider when we journey into understanding the effectiveness of different treatments and processes on the hair and scalp. And I have to be honest, when I hear most practitioners talk about how they do their research, most of them are talking about doing a Google search and basically regurgitating what they find. So while it's a good start to look on Google, it doesn't even come close to doing good science. So during today's broadcast, Dr. Andrea Echeverry and me, we are going to chat about some of the challenges we face as hair researchers for hair and scalp health. So before I bring her on, I would love to know who is out there with me today. So if you'll let me know by putting your name and where you're from. And then if you could also let me know if you are a practitioner, put the number 1. If you are a consumer, put the number 2. And if you are a scientist or a researcher such as myself, put the number 3. And then also feel free to like and share this broadcast. And I know that a lot of times I get to talking, and there are people who say, oh, I should have told such and such about the broadcast. So be sure to do that right now. Now, if you are frustrated with the lack of information that's available to you when it comes to finding out what to do with your hair, you definitely are not alone. And I would love for you to sign up for a consultation with my team. I am trying to find the banner. Here we go. And you can see that at the bottom of the screen right now. Also, I do have a free resource for you. It's called Finding the Right Stylist. And so if you would like to get a copy of that, if you haven't already done so, you can go there and find that as well. All right. So, want to go ahead and get started. And so I am going to bring on my special guest. All right, there she is. All right. And so, if you are
Hello.
just joining, welcome to the Our Black Hair Matters Lunchtime Chat. Today's topic is about hair loss and hair science and how we research solutions. And I am Dr. Crystal Porter, and today I am here with Dr. Andrea Echeverry. She is a fellow scientist and researcher who has been using her expertise in microbiology to help men with hair loss. So I'd like to welcome you.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, you know what's interesting? I always talk about the need for collaboration, and I just want to share how I met you. I met you, and so I believe you ran across the Save Our Scalps initiative, and you reached out on that page, and you're like, "Hey, I'd love to set up a time to talk." So me, you, and my research partner, Dr. Jared Hampton Marcel, we got together and we spoke a little bit about your background and what you were passionate about. And there are some things that you've been noticing while, helping out your clients. And so I thought it'd be a great idea to not only keep in touch with you, but to also share what you do with others. All
Yes, of
right.
course. So that's why going back to the history of how we met is important because I had already been doing research for a while. And, as scientists, especially when we're in academia, we had access to so many resources, so much equipment, so much collaboration. I figure there has to be somebody out there who's actually doing and generating the data and have the tools available for me to like answer the questions that I had. And so that's how I found you guys. And I was so excited because there's really not that much research, actual research being done on the scalp. There is now, I think, a lot of direct to consumer marketing about scalp health that has absolutely no basis on research. And so,
That's so true.
that's one of the major issues that we encounter, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I know we are going to dive in, but I first want to give you a proper introduction, and I want to read a little bit of your bio. And so, Dr. Andrea Echeverry is a lifelong biologist with a specialty in microbial pathogenesis and chronic low level inflammation. During her PhD studies in microbiology and immunology at the University of Miami, she developed the first neonatal mice model of intestinal infection using fully pathogenic human isolated strains of Yersinia enterocolictica. Despite having made many discoveries after a let's do that over. Despite having many discoveries, after a decade in academic research, she decided to become independent to pursue her own scientific interest in gut and skin microbiome. This led her to become a hair loss specialist. This field allows her to study microbiome interactions in the smallest human organ, which is the hair follicle. She is an expert in hair transplant scar camouflaging, biocompatible hair implantation, scalp micropigmentation, and hair follicle replication. With these techniques, she cosmetically enhances the appearance of patients who suffer from hair loss or hair thinning due to gut and skin dysbiosis and environmental factors. So that's awesome. Awesome background, impressive as well. And so I wanted to just dive into your motivation to even leave that academia setting and then start going out on your own and helping people with hair loss.
Yeah, so me leaving academia was bittersweet moment. I graduated in 2008 and there was a hiring freeze at the time. And so I did not see pursuing a postdoc really as the way for me to continue. And I realized how expensive research really was, but at the same time, how wasteful it was. How we would
Mm,
spend so many years circling and circling, around a topic. And at the end, you publish, but so few people actually get to get that knowledge and pass it on.
yeah.
So I was very disenchanted with academia for that reason. And I needed a break. I was very burnt out. And so my ex husband and I went into business together. I basically got an amazing view of the business side of things. I had the research side and that collaborative, thing that happens in academia, but then I needed more of the business side, everything that really entails into doing marketing, how to make money by, seeing clients, that kind of thing. And that took about 3 years. And at that time, we found scalp micropigmentation as an option for people who were completely bald. And so, since I'm a microbiologist, he figured, this seems like a pretty good way for her to reintegrate herself into something that's biological and working more with people one on one. And so we were really one of the first companies in the US offering scalp micropigmentation, where the treatment was being done by somebody with some scientific background or biological background. I'm not a medical doctor, right? I'm a PhD. And so it was really amazing. The first few years, we were getting some of the most complicated, botched cases in hair transplantation. And it was partially seeing these clients who had struggled for so long that needed so much my help. But at the same time, I realized that over 80% of people looking for the service were not good candidates for it, not for the actual micropigmentation component, which is a tattoo. And so when I started getting all of these cases with chronic scalp issues that first needed to have, the terrain improved before we went into the cosmetic component, I realized that some of the tools that were available, at least for dermatologists, were so limited. And then trichology was in its infancy, right? This is over 10 years ago. And there were really like no set standards even in trichology. And I said, wow, this is an opportunity for me to use all the skills that I have and that I have learned to be able to, ask and push a little bit more, because I just saw so many dogmatic, things being said about hair loss and repeating, the same thing. And I'm like, a lot of this makes no sense whatsoever. So having a formal training in science, but not a formal training in hair loss, allowed me to use, a lot more of my skills in the beginning, because I didn't feel like I had to fit in a specific box like it happens for a lot of medical doctors, that this is all the tools that they have and this is as far as they see. I felt that I could have a lot more freedom and just like, well, let's see what happens. And I've been very successful, pretty much trying to ask the right questions and try to find the fastest answer. Maybe not the way that we do things in academia, but the way that I believe is the most beneficial for the consumers or for clients.
Wow. That's impressive. I think that one thing that you said is that it took you 3 years to figure out the business aspect of, serving people and getting that going.
Correct.
So kudos to you for that. I think a lot of people have this bright idea and they think it's just easy. They can just start. So,
I know.
but yeah,
It's not.
right. But your scientific background, I think, gives you a lot of credibility and probably comforts a lot of your clients as well. I
Correct.
believe that your approach would be very methodical, and and I think that kind of goes into the next thing that I'd like to talk about, because I think when a lot of professionals talk about doing studies, they, as I said earlier, go on Google and they just start talking about what they've read or what they've heard on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little bit about the differences between what you and I would do and what someone is saying that they're doing in terms of research. Like, I've read lots of people say, oh, I do studies, and what I do is I collect the data. But I don't think they understand that research is more than just collecting data or making
Right.
observations. I mean, I think that's a part of it, but it's what we do, is how we strategically determine how we're going to collect the data,
Right. And what
what
data to
kind of
collect.
data, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's so many things to consider. So what are your thoughts on that?
So this is the reason why I always felt an advantage being a scientist, because after all, in the beginning, when you don't really know what you're doing, you have to do so much more than what you think you actually have to do, right? And so in the beginning, it was taking me 40 minutes before the beginning of an actual session on a client to collect that data, because I didn't know what I needed to collect. So that took a lot of time. Of course, when you have an assistant and they're like just writing down numbers and they're like, what the hell is going on here? And then the client is like, oh, what's happening? Why is this taking so long? I put a few through the gauntlet, but then they realized, oh, once I put it on a graph and I show them this is what's happening, and I can have a direct conversation with the client, I literally went into collecting data in some cases because I had clients that were not helping their case and were not being compliant. And I figured if I collect the data that I need and show them a graph or a picture, it's gonna click. And that's exactly what happened. Being a scientist helped me be able to find ways to convince clients to be more compliant. So in a way, this is very unusual how we do science. Normally we have subjects. We don't share the data with them. We keep it for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I found that by teaching the client to think a little bit like I do and to see things the way that I do, it actually started helping a lot. Of course, this is not the way that, if you work for a pharmaceutical company, it's not the way that data is going to be collected. And yes, there's different kinds of studies. But for my purposes, where I wanted everything to be very functional, where I knew that if I could improve this client with this protocol, that I could replicate it, well, I needed to have those standards of what data did I collect, how often did I collect it, under what conditions was the data collected, like something so minor as wiping something with a little alcohol pad can make such a big difference if you don't have a standard operating protocol in place. And so these are all the things. And again, because I was mentored by somebody who is an amazing scientist, you just start, you have like all these things in your mind, all the variables that you know that you need to be controlling for, and you start improving your methodology. But it is very difficult work. It isn't easy, which is the reason why having collaborative associations like what we have is very helpful for people to minimize that learning curve and not waste so much time. I love science and I love the scientific method, but I have encountered many people who don't. They just want the soundbite. And so now I'm at a point where I can give them the soundbite without them having to go through the difficult steps that I went through in a way. But it's still part of the scientific method, just that they have to do much less to be able to gather that data, if that is the case.
Yeah. So when you talk about the way that you're going about collecting the data, I know from my experience, there's so many variables that can change or influence what it is you're looking at. And while you're trying to make sense out of it and tell one particular story, or as you said, like have a sound bite,
Yes.
sometimes if the study is done in such a way that it just kind of camouflages, it's a lot of gray area, and you're like, oh my God, I don't even
Yes.
know what this is to make sense out of it.
Right.
So what do you think are some of the variables that we need to consider when doing these types of studies?
Well, the good thing is that we're not flying completely blindly, right? When you look at, and this is something that actually inspires me a lot, because I realize now that a lot of the dermatological articles are coming out about hair loss. They have improved, right, in the way that how they collect the data, how they select their subjects. I think that following those very clear guidelines of what is the population that you're studying, where you're going to be controlling for the major variables. You cannot be comparing apples and oranges when you have males and females. I mean, there's specifically very different things. So, and then we go into statistics, right? So you need to have enough number of subjects in each group, or you have to just wait to gather even more people in a specific group. So you're controlling for gender, a geographical location. Many times when I see some of these multi-center studies, right, because they're trying to increase the number of subjects, but they're comparing people in Greece, in Brazil, and then Canada. And like, no wonder the data looks so muddled sometimes, because they're not really controlling for that in a way. And age, I think, is the other very important factor. For years, I worked with people over the age of 40. In my observations then in that population 40 to 60 compared to 15 to 20, they're completely different. So being able to find in a way a niche allows you to then be able to gather the data within the subject population, where you're going to see the same kind of repeated case over and over, and be able to control for those variables. I myself, the one variable that I'm always controlling for is temperature and humidity, because I have seen differences since I work in the southern part of the US, where we have 8 months out of the year as summer. But humidity has changed. And so you have to be able to gather the data in real time. I think that's the other mistake many people do. They don't realize how much stuff they have to do in real time, because then trying to go back and get it so that you can do the statistics that are necessary is very difficult. And so that's really where sometimes being more simplistic in what you're trying to do can help a lot, and having the right tools. I think that we have entered a moment for hair loss and trichology that is really special. There was so many tools for face, but there were no tools for the scalp. And now we have ways to quantify, to measure, to be able to distinguish even minor changes in hair thickness that we didn't have before, so that you can actually, a lot of people follow what they see with their eyes. I'm a microbiologist, and so I kind of have built-in microscopes anyway. But gathering the data and being able to measure things, it is so much more powerful that way. Also, because the people who are trying to reach out for services, if they do trust that you have done your due diligence in what you're doing and the products that you're supporting and your methodology, they're going to want to see macroscopic changes. And so for you to be able to gather microscopic changes where you can see things literally within a few days can really help that person then be compliant with what they need to do, so that they can see the macroscopic changes 2 weeks, a month, 3 months from now. And that's where experience really comes in as well. You have to be able to make a prediction. You have to be honest with clients. That's unfortunately what happens a lot with the marketing direct to consumer, where they don't tell them how quickly they're going to see results. And then you go back to their website. It's like, oh, well, this is our results 6 months later, 9 months later. And it's like, ooh, I thought this was going to happen quicker. So being able to really project, right, based on what you see as you're gathering the data, and you can make predictions of what's going to happen, I think is very important. And it's the reason why I have so many clients who are very committed, because I can demonstrate to them and I can educate them as we go along as to what it is that we're looking for. And then they become their own advocates. And I've had actually clients gather data at home once I have taught them how to do it. So I'm very big into citizen scientists. I think that we all have a little bit of that inside. And I've been trying to create this, but it takes a lot, because you have to instruct people how to set up this, how to look for this, how to adjust for this. So it comes with a lot of didactic kind of videos and demonstrations, but it is something that I have been able to be successful doing. So I'm excited.
Wow, you talked about a lot. You talked about something like humidity, and being a hair scientist, that is like one of the things that is amazing to me, how our hair fibers are so sensitive to humidity. But in looking at conditions of the scalp, I can see how, the skin is also going to respond to its environment. So when you have changes in humidity,
Exactly.
that has to be considered. But it makes me think about how when you're treating someone, you may start like in the summer, but they may not start getting results until the fall. Now, I'm thinking about
Correct.
here in Chicagoland. So
You
to
got it.
me, there are some places where it's higher humidity most of the year, right? So you're talking about you're in South Florida, so it's pretty humid there. In Texas, like Houston, for example,
Yes.
very high humidity there. Here in Chicago, it fluctuates so much. Usually very low humidities, especially late fall, early winter. And then we usually get higher humidities, I would say like around August, we really start seeing an increase
But
in
very short
humidity.
amount of time.
It spikes, yes. And so, wow, you also talked about citizen science, which I talked about that on an episode earlier. Ooh, it was some time ago. But can you tell people what that means. I think that is really, really exciting. I love studies that involve the population where they can, not only collect their own data, but they can actually find out about what's going on with them personally. So,
Correct.
yeah, can you talk about that a
So,
little bit?
so again, because I feel that getting a PhD, right, we are, after all, a minute population, right? We were shown
Yeah.
a side of the world and a side of science that almost nobody gets a chance to. We are too privileged as scientists for the experience that we went through, but it makes me very sad that the general public doesn't even know that it exists. The image that they have of what a scientist is and does, with what they see in the movies and what's in reality is so different that I felt there is no way that I can live and continue running my practice, especially as an educator, right? Like my whole purpose has always been, I want to pass down my knowledge to other people. Nobody can think like me, right? I find some people that do, but nobody can connect the dots the way that I do. That is, after all, decades of training my brain to do that. But the patients and the clients, whenever I introduce them to the methodology and when I'm collecting, they get excited about it because it brings a little bit of that child way that we lost, right? When we're being introduced to math and science. And then people lose their way and their love for the basics of nature. And so I work with a lot of clients who live in other states. And there is only so much that I can do with pictures from far away. I need sometimes to get that view directly on the scalp. And the moment that I do, the client then gets a completely different visual of what's going on, and it allows me to then make decisions about their case. And so I've been setting up a very basic trichology kit that it involves simple microscope that can be connected to a phone. A lot of us use really expensive dermoscopes, which are not needed. This is only $30. I also use, especially for people who are having issues around the front line, I use something as simple as a skin moisture reader, another $20 tool. So basically for under $80 and very simple videos and instructions, people can start collecting or at least checking. The whole point is to be able to have a benchmark of what it is that we're looking for so that the person can also change their protocol in real time as they learn what it is that I'm looking for. So again, as an educator, I didn't go into academia and continue as a professor, but I can't move away from that. I'm a teacher at heart. And so that's actually what excites me. And I think it is one of the few things that keeps me going strong and feeling like I don't want to quit the industry. Like there is a place for me to continue being in hair loss because I know that nobody else is doing it, but it should be. In the same way, I tell clients all the time, well, you know how you go to a dentist, right? And you have your cleaning every 6 months. Why is it that with hair loss issues being so prevalent, we don't do that? Nobody even knows what trichology is. It's just barely starting to get there. And with COVID-19, I realized, we totally missed the boat, right? But I'm hoping that things are going to change and that we can have some impact that can be a little bit that shockwave that we need because there's too many people suffering and there's not that many of us doing what needs to be done. So that's why I'm like churning, still hopeful that things will change and things will improve.
Absolutely. So you and I have the ability to know how to ask the right questions when it comes to deciding what services would be beneficial if we had problems, right? So I get a lot of people who are like, I don't know. As a matter of fact, just yesterday I was on the phone with someone and she was talking about how she really doesn't trust anyone. She's gone to several professionals and she feels just took their money. And so I want to ask you, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to figure out how to vet someone? I mean, I think it's easy for you and I to kind of know how to do it because we know how to have our ear out for things that just don't sound right. So I'm just curious about some of the things that you would consider.
I know it is, in fact, because most people find me as a scalp micropigmentation specialist. That's the service that they're looking for, but they have already been run through the gauntlet by other practitioners, where that's exactly building that trust is so difficult.
Yeah.
It requires a lot from my part to demonstrate to that person that they're in good hands. And so that's the reason why I think being able to set up over time the standards of care, just like we expect other medical doctors to do, it is so important. My dream in my head, and then I'll answer your question, is that barbers and hairstylists, especially the programs that are set up in the US, that the curriculums change. It's way too many hair professionals literally missing it's knowledge that they can get in literally 3 months that would make such a huge difference. It will be an amazing ripple effect throughout the entire industry, because I train barbers and hairdressers, and many times it's almost like they have no knowledge basis to be seeing people for hair loss, but that's the first person that they encounter. And unfortunately, many of them take their clients in the wrong path because there is a financial gain by them selling them a specific product. And that's it. That's where the disconnect is. And then somebody else finds themselves, 6 to 10 months later, looking for somebody when it's already too late. And so I really think that in the same way that the medical establishment has set up all these directories, we need to have something like this. It is still, especially with the trichology societies that do exist, I think it is still too disjointed. We need to join forces, because I don't think that the public itself can even make it through another virus like what we just went through, which does induce hair loss. Another strain like this that can, induce telogen, we're going to end up with what, 80% of people going bald, and then all of these barbers and hairdressers not really having clients because they didn't get on the boat when they needed to. So I think it is very difficult from the client's perspective to find the right person. But I can tell you, the way that the majority of people find me is because they do their due diligence. You have to check credentials. You have to be able to talk to the practitioner directly. You need to make sure that there's enough cases that have been done by the person of your specific case before you give them the money. So again, as practitioners that we are in a for-profit business, it is very difficult, but then you set up your business so that it's easier for clients to make that decision. I still struggle with this from time to time. If somebody finds me because they have, 15, 20 other options, they don't know what the best option is. Some people get afraid of dealing with a doctor because they think back to the experience with other doctors, but perhaps looking for people that have already achieved a slightly higher level of education, whatever those credentials may be, it's a lot better than just going to whoever was recommended by you or whoever Google recommended based on your geographical location. You may need to do as a client a lot more legwork than you expect, and hopefully you will find a practitioner that it's already there and knows that they need to make that entry level, right, and to build a relationship with you a little bit faster. I know that my clients love that they have direct access to me. They don't have to go through 2 or 3 secretaries. They can get very simple answered right away. And this is where technology also comes in. Google is not the best place to find some things. There are many group chats where you can actually find information where people have already dealt with these issues, and then they'll introduce you to what's already set up. But it takes a lot of research, and not totally on Google, unfortunately. You do have to use other sources to find them. Social media is very problematic because it's difficult sometimes to find images that haven't been doctored. But if you look at some of the best products out there, you realize that they lead always with case studies, just like we would in science. They're not going to be leading with ingredients and with reviews and things like this. It's going to be a picture that is so clear that there's no way that it can be doctored. So, trusting social media information is also very difficult for that reason, but it's there. So as a client, you have to do a little bit more work than you expect, but those who search always find. That's how I see it.
Okay. Now, you did talk about a picture being so clear. I mean, I think before and after pictures have their place, but my hashtag is show me the data. I'm all about the data. But yeah, but you have some people who steal other people's photos. It's really easy to take a photo
I
and say,
know.
hey, it's mine, it's my work. And
I know.
it happens. So that's not always the best way, but like you said, talking to someone, looking at their credentials and their case studies is an excellent way for people to try to vet and find the right person. Awesome. Now, you said that you educate hair practitioners, and so you will be at an event giving a talk in November. Can you kind of give us a snapshot, or did you already review what it is you're going to talk about?
So I decided, because it's still 2 months away, a month and a half away, I decided to kind of step out of my usual talk about the scalp microbiome. So the topic of the talk is going to be about what I believe is a mechanism in hair loss that if we were able to gather the data, we will find that it starts extremely early in life. So I'm going to go back to putting together my knowledge on development and then my knowledge on inflammation together with some of the tools that we have available. So it has to do with immune tolerance, right? So this is a concept, especially in hair loss, that I know the majority of people have not really been introduced to. We talk a lot about inflammation, but most people don't know what they're talking about when they're talking about inflammation. So I'm going to connect the dots between development, the environment, and then the loss of immune tolerance within the hair follicle as an organ. I really think that is something that a lot of people don't even understand. Because I'm in hair transplantation, it is something that we're always controlling for, after all, minimizing the damage to every single hair follicle as it's being transplanted. But then how do we make the terrain ready for this little new plant to be placed somewhere else where it wasn't before? And so I'm going to be talking now about hair transplantation, but what I believe happens during development and compounding the environmental factors that I think we need to be looking for right now so that we can minimize the loss of immune tolerance. I really think that this is the key for a lot of the things that we need to be doing going in the future, especially with the aggressive forms of hair loss that we're seeing right now. I really don't want to find myself, like a canary in the mine, 5 years from now, telling people that, their children are going to be losing their hair when it's already too late. These are processes that are already happening. The toxic burden that we are exposed to is too high. And unless we start taking really major changes and steps that has to come from the consumer, I don't think these things are going to really go away, and it's only going to get worse. And by the time people realize that this is a major problem, it might be too late. So I want to talk about hair loss in a different way than most people talk about it, I think. We'll see.
You know what? I have a ton of questions, especially, well, you know what? I will be attending the conference that you'll be at. And so I will definitely, I'll hold my questions because my mind is like going a mile a minute.
I know. That's why. Let me put it all together. I'll share it with you beforehand, especially if I do a script, and then you'll be like, Oh, and then you'll have even more questions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't already shared? We're getting ready to like kind of close up and actually go into what I call what to consider when doing hair research or research in general, things you need to consider. And so, before we go into that, anything you want to share?
I think we talked about a lot of things. What I would like to perhaps, a little shout out to anybody who's watching this presentation, right, and seeing us as established researchers, that we all have that little scientific genius within us. I think a lot of people are always looking for a way to make money, but at this point, at this junction that we find ourselves in the world, you have to start looking for what were you born to do. And like I said, I think that there's still a lot of room for people who have knowledge and skills to really bring it one step above without having to go to graduate school, right, and suffer like we did. This is the time to do it, where you have, you know what I mean, where the ultimate goal is to really help humanity as much as we possibly can. Making money always comes along the way, but finding that passion, right? If you already work in hairdressing, in trichology, as a barber, you find yourself a little bit tired of doing the same thing, know that there's a lot more beyond what you know. And I think that we can be a good source for these people to find their way to a new career and to something that can really help the public in general. We need you guys. We need a lot more hair soldiers behind, I think.
Absolutely. I always say that stylists, their fingertips are at the data that we as scientists need. And so we can't be everywhere at once. So I think collaborating in a way that we can all help one another. That's, in my opinion, the best. So thank you
Yes,
for that.
exactly.
Yeah. So how are people going to find you? Where can you be reached?
Thank you. So the main company through which I prefer for people to contact me is Hair Pigment Center. It's my main company in Florida.
Mhm.
I am able to see clients in person at my home office in South Florida, which is in Davie, close to Fort Lauderdale. I also have a location available in Orlando, and in Atlanta. I work with Dr. Nikki Hill at SOCA. And so people who are in Georgia can also see me in person at that location. Naples is the next location that is coming up. So wherever you are, we're most likely an hour away at the most to see me in person. But Hair Pigment Center is the company that I established with my ex-husband. Thank you. And so through the website, you can find a lot of information about some basic services. And then if you want a quote, you can go to the quote form, and there's 3 specific types of quotes or services that I already have set up where I can do the remote consultation once I receive all the information, especially pictures. Somebody wants to work with me, I do need them to fill out the information completely. That way we don't waste as much time. And I'm able to provide information as to the treatment steps and the cost for those who benefit from those specific services.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I appreciate it.
No problem. So, quickly, I would like for us to talk about what to consider when doing research. So, this segment is what to consider when doing research. And so, I want it to be a summary of what we've already discussed. So, the first thing that I want to talk about, I keep harping about Google, right? And so I think it's a good place to get idea about trends and considerations. But I think what you talked about in terms of as simplistic as possible when it comes to doing a study, you really have to control the different variables. And so, for example, if you look at a particular biomarker before and after a particular treatment, if you measure the dosage that you're using and keep that consistent. If you have a consistent application, so for
Right.
example, if you apply it and then you massage it, then you have to apply it and massage it all the time. And then also like the timing of the measurements. And
Yes.
so I think that will really help us with understanding the effects of treatment. So something I want to say as simple as that, but it really isn't simple, as you know, but it helps to cut out all the noise.
Yes. Absolutely. At least those are like the basic steps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you want to add anything?
I think you covered it all. But again, guidance. Whoever wants to go through this journey needs to have the right guidance. I really think that that's the reason why that continuing education component that perhaps we don't have in our field needs to be there. There are quite a few conferences that are coming up where I'm really hoping that there will be even more on hands training. I loved giving the talk and going to the seminar and watching other people talk, but I think the hands on training is what needs to be happening. So, whoever's interested in learning more, reaching out to the people who set up conferences and let them know, can we do the live demos that are necessary to really learn what we need to learn? I think that that would be one important thing, because that will be the perfect setup for people to get hands eyes on exactly what the procedure would be, so that it's very standardized. I'm a visual learner, and so that's the reason why most of my material, when I'm teaching somebody how to do something, it's either doing it and then videotaping. They have to go through both of the steps. They have to see somebody else doing it, and then they have to be able to do it on themselves. So like the application, it took me a while to figure out that people were not applying a product correctly. They were not dispensing the right amount. So, so just having that visual that is very clear, and what the volumes are and what the amount is and exactly how you do it and how much pressure makes a big difference.
No,
So
absolutely.
demos, I think we need a lot more demos.
And that feeds into education, right? I can't tell, well, I can tell you because you get it. But the amount of times that I made so many mistakes to actually learn what not to do in order for me to go
Right,
down the right path. I mean,
right.
so having that experience that you're talking about with the hands-on procedures or education, I think that is definitely key as well. Definitely need to consider that.
Absolutely.
And I would say the last thing that I would say, I'm always talking about diversity of thought and diversity in experiences. I really do think that you cast a wider net, and you can really improve the critical thinking aspect of designing the study. And
Yes,
so I think you can expect, or you can plan on what the expectations are, but keep an open mind, because at least for me, and I hear this all the time, when I was in grad school, I was looking at one thing, or I thought my dissertation was going to be on one thing, and then I kept observing something else, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't doing what I thought it was going to do, but something else
right.
over here. And so, having those different perspectives, when you have a lot of, great minds together, then I think you can just build a better mousetrap, so to speak, no matter what your goal
Absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Awesome. So thank you again. I want you, so even though I'm going to close up, I want you to stay on. So I don't want you to leave
No
the
problem.
the back of the broadcast. But there are, lots of things that we discussed, and I'm sure that some of the viewers, some of you have questions. So be be sure to put your comments and questions in the chat. We would love to get back to you on it, even though this is pre-recorded. But also share some of your experiences. I mean, we would love to know what you've been doing. Like if you have been wanting to do your own research and you just can't figure out what you're doing wrong or whatever, that is what collaboration is all about. So
Correct.
feel free to let us know. And I just want to remind people, if you are looking for a vetted professional, you can definitely go to my scheduler, which is, let me see if I can find it. It is, gotta go all the way up on top. Here we go. links.maininsights.com/APPT to schedule an appointment. And then, yeah, we are here for you. And until next time, always remember that our Black hair matters. And as always, take care and love your hair. Bye-bye.